Today on Inside Utah Politics, connecting Utahns to the federal courts. A new bill could be a game changer for people in Moab and Monticello. Plus, a Utah railroad project hits the highest court in the land. How the Uintah Basin project could reshape environmental regulations. And a shakeup at the state auditor's office. How the newly elected Tina Cannon would change things after a decade of John Dougal.
Time now for Inside Utah Politics.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Jordan Tracy. Let's go inside Utah politics. We begin our program with a look at a new push for change in the federal court system that could allow thousands of Utahns to finally participate in the process. Representatives John Curtis and Celeste Malloy sponsored a bill that would allow the federal court hearings to happen in Moab and Monticello. Now, right now, that can only happen in Ogden, Salt Lake City, Provo, and St. George. Now, that bill has passed the House to look at what this would do for residents of southeastern Utah. I'm joined by Monticello Mayor Bailey Hedgelin. Mayor Hedgelin, welcome to Inside Utah Politics.
Glad to be here.
So I've gone through this bill, and the functional part is literally just one sentence. It's amending the existing code to add Moab and Monticello to the list of acceptable venues for federal court. It's a simple change on paper. What can you tell us? What would this mean for your community?
I think the key benefits are things like improved access to justice. You know, previously we've had to travel several hours to either attend or, to serve jury duty is usually we're excluded from just because of the travel restrictions. So removing those barriers of the travel, and it just really opens up more participation in civic duties for our residents, which is just great. I think it also really supports law enforcement and legal professionalism. The localizing court proceedings, it really reduces the logistical challenges for our law enforcement officers and attorneys and witnesses. So hopefully that will lead to more efficient case management and resource allocations. It's, even looking at things like increased compliance and participation, again, removing those barriers is just huge for us down here in these parts.
Your town is nestled among thousands of acres of public land and not too far from the Colorado River. Tell us a bit about some of the issues that are likely to be in federal court that will actually affect the people you serve.
I would imagine it would be things like poaching is probably one of the main ones. Any sort of issues, any offenses that are done on that federal ground. Cases like that is what we've seen the most of.
Interesting. And you kind of mentioned in the previous answer about how logistically this frees things up. There's professionals that have to travel a lot of way to do that. And do you think that, having that obstacle has kind of been a little bit of an obstacle of justice and federal law practice?
Definitely. I think it really, ties in with the timely administration of that justice. With the easier access to those court facilities, it would ensure that more cases can proceed without any sort of delays that are caused by those travel restrictions and just upholding that principle of timely justice.
Now, would Monticello need to do anything to be ready to host federal court cases? Are there any changes that need to be made?
I'm not exactly sure on that. I mean, we have the court set up already. I can't imagine if it may require more hiring of additional judicial. I really don't know. I'll just be honest. I don't really know, but I think
Sure.
we're ready. I feel like we're ready.
Sure. Now, is this something that's been either a long time coming? Have you and other local leaders had conversations with congressional delegations about things like this?
Not this specifically. I think it ties in more with just kind of that. Just a little bit more of an eye on rural America and what's happening here, and that we are here, and that sometimes things don't necessarily fit. It's not a one-size-fits-all for everybody, and so having little things like this really opens up that just that eye on rural America and what it means to live 5 hours from these types of things. So.
Absolutely. And another big issue in southeastern Utah is the nuclear legacy of the Cold War. Federal funding to downwinders through the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act has lapsed. How has that played out in your community, and what would you like to see happen in Washington when this issue comes back up?
So Monticello is a Superfund site. Our uranium mill tailings, which our community was really largely built upon, is one of the only mills that was federally owned. And when that shut down, of course, we've had very high instances of cancer and whatnot. We have, through the city, the victims of the mill tailing exposure. And we receive federal funding for screenings currently only at the moment. And so that program, as well as the downwinders, has really served to help our community. And so seeing these things on the possible chopping block is hard just because we are still feeling some of these effects of some of those programs. So I really hope that they can see that, yes, while it has been cleaned up, all these things are safe and we're good now, there are still effects happening to community members who live here and who worked in those at that mill.
And then, Mayor, finally, Utah's legislative session is almost about a month out. What are some of the key issues for your community that should be raised and could be raised on the state level?
Well, I think always the land issues. With the designation of the Bears Ears, it feels like we're kind of a football being kicked back and forth politically. I think that's probably the main issue right now. Of course, water, housing, some of those that I don't think we're unique in with the rest of the state, but some of those things like national monuments and just the land disputes are something that it makes it hard to really plan for a future when we're never sure where our boundaries and what could transpire based on a new administration. Some of those things just are that weigh heavy on us, I would say.
Mayor Hedgeland, thank you so much for joining Inside Utah Politics.
Thank you. Thank you again for having me.
Well, still ahead on Inside Utah Politics, Midvale's got a new mayor. We meet the man who won the top job on a coin toss when we come back. Welcome back. A man is facing a charge after Congresswoman Mace says he assaulted her because of her views on transgender people. But witnesses say that's not what they saw. Washington, D.C. correspondent Hannah Brandt explains the controversy.
Today, Congresswoman Mace showed up for work with her arm in a sling. She says that's because last night she was, quote, physically accosted at the Capitol by a pro-trans man.
The reports, at least, of the alleged assault and attack on Mace are very troubling.
The Congresswoman's team calls this an altercation over trans rights. Mace has drawn controversy in recent weeks over legislation she introduced to ban transgender women from using women's bathrooms on Capitol Hill.
No member of Congress should be accosted or assaulted or attacked based on their political beliefs.
Mace's office thanked U.S. Capitol Police for responding quickly. Officers say they arrested 33-year-old James McIntyre of Illinois. He now faces a charge of assaulting a government official.
But witnesses tell news outlet The Imprint they saw the incident unfold and it wasn't an assault at all. Policy advocate Elliot Hinkle told the publication McIntyre introduced himself to Mace, shook her hand, and talked to her about trans youth. He said, "From what I saw, it was a normal handshake and interaction." I asked Congresswoman Mace's office about the dispute over her story, and they told me in a statement, quote, "With an ongoing investigation, we're limited in what we can share. However, this incident underscores the alarming lengths to which the left will go to silence women who dare to stand up against the trans takeover." Congresswoman Mace also says President-elect Trump called her to check in after the incident. In Washington, I'm Hannah Brandt.
Meantime, the Supreme Court may limit environmental regulations in the case of a proposed railroad in the Uintah Basin. 7 Utah counties brought the case to the court earlier this week. The proposal would build 88 new miles of rail to connect oil and gas producers there to the national rail network. Here's a look at the map. The project has been in limbo since a federal appeals court overturned its approval last year. The argument in court was over just how broad environmental reviews of these projects can be.
By the courts taking an overly aggressive role, it's in turn created an incentive for the agencies to do 3,000-page EI, environmental impact statements.
Are you saying that anything that falls outside these 88 miles is not their problem?
I'm saying that anything that is outside that 88 miles and is in the jurisdiction of another agency is not something that should be fatal to an EIS.
After oral argument there, the 7-county infrastructure coalition released a statement to us. That group wants the project to move forward. Here's what they said. They told us we remain committed to advancing this critical infrastructure, which aims to unlock economic opportunities and support the region's long-term development. We appreciate the court's careful consideration of this matter and will await its decision with confidence. Governor Cox weighed in too, saying, "This is about more than just connecting Utah oil to refineries. It's about our ability to build the infrastructure that drives America forward. We're hopeful the Supreme Court will affirm our efforts and recognize what's at stake." Only 8 justices heard the case after Neil Gorsuch recused himself. A former client of his has an interest in the case. We expect a ruling by the end of June. Utah is honoring its first ever woman senator with a place in Congress. They unveiled a statue of Dr. Martha Hughes Cannon earlier this week. That same statue sat in Utah's Capitol earlier this year. That reveal was years in the making. The ceremony was originally set for 2020 to mark the 100-year anniversary of women's suffrage. Utah leaders were there alongside a great-granddaughter of Cannon's who thanked everyone for honoring her legacy.
She used the knowledge she worked so hard to obtain to make real changes in the world in which she lived. If she were alive today, she would still be seen as remarkable.
A Cannon statue is made of local mined copper. She joins a marble state of Brigham Young as one of Utah's 2 representatives in the National Statuary Hall. There's a new mayor for the city of Midvale. Dustin Gettle is taking the city's top spot after a coin toss. It comes after the former mayor was ousted for an alleged extramarital affair with a city employee. Our Jonathan May met him to hear his plans for the future.
It's like a pretty cool coin.
Mayor Gettle is holding on to this coin because the council, tied with 3 candidates, sent the final vote to a round-robin coin toss last night.
That is in the state law. That's not something, we just decided that's how we were going to do things, because I don't think we would have decided it that way.
Gettle then secured a majority 3-2 vote to become mayor. He's been on the city council for almost 7 years.
I look at this role as making sure that our residents, our city staff, and our council members feel empowered to succeed.
He tells me the plans to bring new economic life to Main Street. He says it's ongoing work he's been focused on while on the council.
The coffee shop has been thriving. The pizza shop, I've been there 3 times already. So it's just putting all these little pieces in place, getting people out on the street, activating Main Street. As we get more people on Main Street, then, more businesses, I think, are going to feel comfortable.
Before getting the job, 11 candidates showed up with sales pitches to city council. They had a couple of minutes to speak.
Saw that there was a posting for the mayor of Midvale, and I thought it'd be pretty cool to go out for it.
If it's something that you're interested in, for sure. Yeah, why not? Give it a go.
For the most part, everyone did a great job with their presentations. I was very hopeful that some of those folks stay involved in the process.
The mayoral spot was open after former mayor Marcus Stevenson resigned in November after he was accused of having an extramarital affair with a city employee.
I am looking forward to the future, not just the 1 year remainder of the previous mayor's term, but looking forward to 4 more years after that as well.
That was Jonathan May reporting. Coming up, meet your new state auditor. Tina Cannon is joining the program to talk about how she'll run her new office.
You're watching Inside Utah Politics.
Well, welcome back, everybody. We're taking some time today to mark a major change in an office that doesn't always get that much attention, the state auditor. Utahns have elected their first new auditor in a decade after John Dougal decided not to run for re-election. He's been replaced now by Tina Cannon, the deputy state auditor. She joins us here today. State Auditor-elect Tina Cannon, welcome to the program. Glad to have you here.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, so let's talk auditor's office here. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of it, though, bring us up to speed on sort of your background and how you came to the office.
All right. So this is the premier accounting firm for the state of Utah. We have oversight over almost $60 billion in funding for all state government and local government. So counties, cities, school districts, universities. The state auditor's office has oversight. But that's how I got to know the office. I was elected in Morgan County on their council shortly after an embezzlement had happened. So I got to know the state auditor's office fairly well through putting that back together and implementing changes in policy in local government. So when John Dougal, the current state auditor, reached out and asked me to join his team, I was happy to do it because I've seen the importance of what we do in the office. And I'm excited to continue the vision that John had and then to build on it.
I'm sure it's helpful that you're no stranger to the office.
No.
You've had plenty of experience in that office.
Right.
How might you differ from John Dougal?
Well, of course, we're different personalities, and I have an accounting background, and John is an engineer, so we see things slightly differently on the accounting side. So there will be some changes that will come out of that. But I do think that there have been great changes in the office under John that we will continue. Transparency has been a big push for John. Transparent Utah is a well-used resource for taxpayers across the state in finding out where the money goes in Utah. I encourage everyone to go to transparent.utah.gov and check it out. We'll continue those efforts to make sure that all of Utah's taxpayer dollars are accessible and accountable to the taxpayer, and that you can track by agency, by entity, where that money is going.
Well, let me ask you this. You've said before that government is built for transparency, not necessarily efficiency.
Right.
But part of your job duties will be looking at how the taxpayer dollar is spent and looking at efficiencies there. So how do you balance those two principles, transparency and efficiency?
Well, anytime you're dealing with other people's money, you have to err on the side of dual control, or making sure that there is oversight over every dollar. That's where embezzlements happen, is when you have the ability for a single person to have oversight over finances. So we make sure that there's a proper control process there, and then on top of that the money is used wisely. It's also, in many times in Utah, the money is restricted for a certain purpose. So that's where compliance audit comes in. Are they using the money only for what it was designated to be used for? So there are a lot of different types of audits that we do in the office. There's a lot of oversight that we have in making sure that $60 billion is being used for exactly what it's supposed to be used for.
I want to ask you this. Mr. Dougal had sometimes a difficult relationship with lawmakers, right? How do you plan on navigating that relationship with the legislative branch as you take over?
Well, I don't have a penchant for recording myself in a bathroom, so
okay. No
I don't
bathroom
think,
stall tirades.
No, it's just not in my personality. So no worries there. But I do think there is a relationship there that we do. At this point in time, we are dependent on the legislature to properly fund the office for the correct amount of oversight that is due that billions of dollars of taxpayer money. So we want to have a good relationship with those that set that amount of our budget. But we also have oversight over how some of that money is spent, whether or not the oversight is actually through statute there. So I anticipate a good relationship with the legislature. I appreciate John's penchant to point out areas where he differs. I tend to be a little more, I just tend to be a little more behind the scenes.
Okay.
I just don't want to be I don't want to be the face in the bathroom. Let's just.
Okay, so we won't see those videos from you.
No.
Okay, let me ask you this then, since we're talking about publicity. What are some misconceptions you hear about the auditor's office? What do people think you do that you don't, or you don't that you do?
Well, most people just don't know the extent of what we do. Because not only do we have oversight over the money, the state privacy officer is part of our office as well. So we have oversight over your personal data that is collected by government. We make sure that it isn't shared improperly, and that we actually have check and oversight in teaching those local agencies what information they need to collect or not and don't need to collect, and making sure that the taxpayers' information is protected, properly disposed of. So we have the state privacy officer. Transparent Utah, most people, it's been shocking as I've campaigned how few people know about Transparent Utah and the information that we provide there. So I think it's more not understanding the full scope of everything that the office does.
Compliance versus enforcement.
Okay,
let's talk about how we balance those two things.
All right. So, well, if you follow anything that we do, in the office, we publish every audit report that we do. So you can really go out and look at what we've found and the implemented changes that we recommend. You have to remember that the most important part about the state auditor's office is that independence, that we are independently elected for that non-biased oversight over that money. So we can make recommendations in those audit letters, but we are dependent on the public to also hold their elected representatives accountable to make sure those changes get put in place. That can happen through myriads of ways. Most importantly, people need to know what we've found so that you can hold an elected official responsible for the proper oversight and the proper procedures and policies to be put in place to correct the problem.
And to that point, how can the taxpayers, the public, best engage with your office, do you think?
So there are lots of things that you can do to engage in our office. So if you see something, if you see waste, fraud, and abuse across the state in any form, in any government, we have a hotline where that can be reported at auditor.utah.gov. We also, if you want to know more about your government, how money is spent, I encourage everyone to go to transparent.utah.gov and look it up. Play with the tools that are out there. There are all sorts of sources of information that are there that we collect all that data and then put it in a searchable format for the taxpayer to use. So that's a great way to interact with us. One of the things that I will do slightly different than John is we are going to have the state auditor's office open, especially during legislative session, where you can come in and ask additional questions about where the money goes in Utah government. You're welcome to come into our office. We'll show you how to find the information in the auditor's office in the Capitol and give you a customized tour of Transparent Utah and the information that we collect for the taxpayers.
The open door policy,
yes.
That's news breaking right here.
If we're going to be
Inside
transparent,
Utah
we're going to be
Politics.
transparent for our office as well and make sure that the doors are open and that we're there staffing it and that we are there to answer people's questions.
State Auditor-elect Tina Cannon, thank you for being here. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Were you good at math?
I was very good at math.
I bet you were. You kind of have to be for the job, right?
Yes, it is. Well, and I'm not a good interior decorator. I'll be the first one to say that. I like my numbers.
Very good. Better you than me. I'm a word guy, not a number guy, so glad we got you. Hey, stay with us, everybody. More Inside Utah Politics coming up right after this.
Well, that does it for today's Inside Utah Politics. Don't forget, if you have any local political stories that you'd like to see, make sure to reach out. You can email InsideUtahPolitics@abc4.com. You can also follow along with me on social media, on X @JordanTracyTV, and on Instagram, search for Jordan Tracy. Find ABC4 on social media to follow along no matter where you are. And while you're at it, download the ABC4 News app. We're always on. Thanks for being with us, everyone. We'll see you next week when we go Inside Utah Politics.